All right, so welcome to today's Advanced Testing Tools workshop. My name is Jan Moody. I'm excited to be here. My colleague Jennie Tookoian just turned her camera on as well. Throughout the next hour, we're going to be walking you through some really cool and advanced features in Edulastic. This is a short list here, and yeah, let's dive right into things. All right, so before I pass things off to my colleague Jennie, there are just a few housekeeping things for us to go over. First, like I said before, welcome to today's event. We're really excited to have you here and think that this next hour is going to be really valuable. I want to direct your attention to the bottom of your Zoom screen. You'll see a little chat icon there. I invite you to type in the chat and share where you're tuning in from, and then also what your role is in education. We want this to be a really interactive event and for you to meet one another and maybe even walk away today with a new friend in education. Maybe you'll meet someone from your school or your district or your state. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. While you're doing that, I also invite you to take a look at the Q&A bubble that's at the bottom of your screen. We do have a lot of people online today. It looks like people are rolling in and saying hello from all over the country. I even see some people from out of the country, so that's really awesome. But because we have so many people online, it means that our chat might be a little bit hectic today. So if you have an official question that you want to make sure gets answered, please use that Q&A bubble that you see at the bottom of your screen. We'll either type a response back to you or we will answer your question during our designated Q&A time at the end of the workshop. All right, so it looks like the chat is working. I think everybody's found the Q&A bubble by now. My one final note about the chat is please make sure that you set it to all panelists and attendees when you are typing in there. This way everybody can see your comments. All right, here's today's plan. Like I said, my name is Jan Moody. I'm a marketing specialist here at Edulastic, and I am really lucky to work with teachers like you and connect you with our really powerful tech tool. Also online with me today is my colleague Jennie Tookoian. She's a customer success manager here at Edulastic, and she knows the app kind of like the back of her hand. So she'll be really great at this presentation today, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. Also online is my colleague Ileana Betancourt. She'll be helping in the chat and with the Q&A bubble. Looks like she is saying hi in the chat as we speak. So thanks to Ileana and thanks to Jennie for being here today. So this little introduction piece will be pretty short and sweet. I will go over just a few resources before passing things off to Jennie, who's going to touch on the Express Grader, report cards, download scores, some really cool power tools in Edulastic. What is Edit and Regrade and how can this help you in your class? And then also some security features. So this is anti-cheating and a bunch of cool stuff like that. We do have a lot to cover in this hour. We're going to try and cover a lot of stuff without going too quickly. So I hope that everybody is as excited as I am. Feel free to ask any questions. We really want to make sure that you leave today with a comprehensive understanding of Edulastic. All right, so this is my last slide before passing things off to Jennie. I wanted to mention that we have this resource page, which is a really great spot to go if you ever have questions about Edulastic, or if you're ever looking for more information or for a training course or for a video or for help. Hopefully Ileana can share the link to this resource page in the chat. But most importantly, I wanted to point out this Edulastic 101 webinar. Today's training is really going to focus on advanced features in Edulastic, kind of like edit and regrade and power tools and some of those really, really cool things that you can do. But with that, if you are brand new to Edulastic, I encourage you to check out an Edulastic 101 training before diving into this, or maybe right after this. So like I said, today's going to be really great, but if you're brand new, check out an Edulastic 101 training. Jennie, I'm going to pass things off to you.
And I'm going to show you sort of a part of this, you're going to see not the presentation view of the presentation, because I'm going to go back and forth between the slides, which will give you an idea of what we'll be talking about. And then I'm actually going to jump into the app and show you how it's done. So I do want to go over some of the flows where you can take a look at it. And I also wanted you to have a tool that you could look at later to refresh your memory on how to do some of these things. So I'll start by saying that around this time of the year, most of the districts and teachers that we're working with are they've gone beyond the building out their classes, exploring in Edulastic, and now they're ready to start with, they could be benchmarks, they could be midterms, or just start really to dive in and use Edulastic on a daily basis for daily assignments. So this is about the time of year where we start to get a lot of questions about how to administer tests, and also some of those advanced features that the new users have heard about or seen about, but haven't had a lot of experience diving in on. So what I decided to do was sort of tackle two concepts at the same time. And so since a lot of you are starting to look at how to give high stakes tests and even formative tests, so you're starting to look at that process, but then at the same time, I can weave through a lot of the expert or advanced features while going through the testing processes or the testing procedures. So that's the plan for today. And so, you know, typically at this time of year, we're looking at how to administer these tests and how to build them. And if you're building a test, obviously that would come first. You need to create the test and then administer it. But for the sake of this presentation, I'm going to flip that process around, and I'm going to talk about administering and some of the test management tools first, because the majority of our users are focused on that. And then building tests, a lot of our authors, that's a smaller subset of our audience. So I'm going to save those for the end of the session. So even though doesn't seem logical, this is the reasoning behind why we're jumping in to a test that's already been created and already been assigned. So before I go too much further, I am going to turn off my camera just so that I can make sure that I preserve as much bandwidth. Just one moment, please. Okay. So when I'm talking about administering and building, I'm talking about in the terms of the test administration, it's a lot of things that we might think of as class management tools, but this is applied to a platform. So this is deciding on the test window and the policies behind the test window, when it's going to open, pause, and close, and how that's going to happen. We'll touch on how to assign or unassign students from an assessment. So for example, if you have already assigned something and a new student comes to class, you'll need to add that test to that person's, add that student to that assessment. And then at the same time, you might need to unassign students from certain assessments. So we'll talk about that. Marking as absent, redirecting, editing and regrading. Then we'll move into the releasing of the scores, sharing the scores, modifying any of the scores, and then looking at the reports. So I'll jump in with the test management tools first, and then at the end of the session, we'll talk about a few of the tricks and tips for working with your colleagues to build tests. So let me jump down in here too. So when I'm talking about administering a test, we're talking, the processes I'm about to show you will cover anything from benchmarks, midterms, beginning of the year tests. It could be anything that's high stakes, district-wide benchmarks, or even those formative checks. All of these decisions will apply, or all of these processes will apply. What I will be doing is I set up the demo to focus on something that was a high stakes test. So thinking about the midterms or the assignment that's been assigned by an admin across the district, and that they would want to keep some tight security around that. And so that's what you'll see here, but as we go through it, I'll walk you through how the different choices you make could be modified for a quick check or a classroom quiz, for example. So I'm going to walk you through the process first, and then we're going to jump into the app. So the first thing you'll do when you've got a test, it's been assigned to you, either by you've assigned it to your classes or an administrator has assigned it to you to open for your classes. And so the first thing you'll do is you'll go to the assignments page and you'll open the assessment. Once it's open, there's some decisions you can make about absent students. So if you mark a student as absent, then they're not able to access that assessment. This is a real valued feature at a high school level or even junior high, where kids are tempted to access or get a hold of the answers early. By marking a student absent, you're removing them from that test and not letting them access it when the rest of the students are able to access it. When they come back, then you can just redirect or reassign it to them. We'll talk about pausing a test and when you'd want to do that versus closing it. Redirect, with our new version that we've recently released this school year, we've got some options for redirect that we'll go over. Once the test has been opened, taken, redirected, then if there's any manually graded or essay type questions, open-ended questions, then the teacher can manually grade them. Then the teacher can release the scores. And finally, the teacher can move to present mode if they want to go over the test with the students. So the majority of these advanced features happen to fall into our premium service or our enterprise level. So it's not on the free services. If you are using the free version and you're looking at some of these, looking for some of these features, it's likely that it's because it's a premium feature. I encourage you just to stick around and watch it either way, because it'll give you an idea of what you could do if you decided to go that direction in the future. So let's jump over here and follow this flow in our app. So I'm going to walk you through the first step. When you sign in, the first thing you'll do is you'll land on your dashboard, as you all know. And we're going to jump over here to the assignments page, because this has already been assigned, either, as I mentioned earlier, by you or by an administrator in your district or school. And so we are going to just jump in here, and you'll see I've got a couple different variations here. Most likely, all of your classes would show the not open. So we're going to first open it. And I'll go over here. So I'm on the assignments screen over here to the live class board. For those of you that are longtime users of Edulastic too, some of these, the location of some of these icons has changed slightly. So you may find something new here, even if you've been using it for a long time. And I'm talking about one of the most basic features. So the easiest thing to do here would be, I would just mark it as open. But the first thing I'll do is I'm going to examine my classroom, or even my Zoom classroom, my virtual classroom, and I'm going to see who's present, who's absent, or and who's in my class. If they're absent, I'm going to mark them as absent. I can't do that though until I technically open it. So I'm going to scan my group here and see who's here. I notice I have one absent student. I'm going to open the test. And then I'm going to immediately, since Kiana is marked, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to mark her as absent. And then I'll confirm it. So what this is doing, as I mentioned earlier, is everybody but Kiana can now access this assessment because she's marked as absent. So it locks her out for the time being. All I have to do when she comes back, as I mentioned earlier, is just select her again and then redirect it to her. So now that I see that this is open, I'm going to jump back over here and we'll look at, you'll see it's now in progress. And so I've got the same assignment that I've started to work on a little bit. So I'm going to jump into that. And as it's in progress, you all as super users or veteran users know that this is building live. And so as the students are writing their answers, the bars are building, and you can see by the color coding who's got what, how long it's taken them to answer. And then you can also see here that this blue bar represents those open-ended questions that need to be manually graded. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by looking down through our list of people. I've got one absent student. I've got one student who has finished everything, but she's still in progress. So if I go over here and look at the manually graded item, I can kind of get a feel for what's going on here. Let's see here. She's answered it, but she still hasn't submitted it. So that could cause a problem for me when I am looking back at the reports. If it's not submitted, all of the data will not be flowing into the reports. So since I see that she's completed it, I'm going to go ahead and mark her as submitted. So this is another feature that you can do as a teacher in managing it, is mark as absent as well as mark as submitted. So now this is submitting her test and she can no longer work on it. And I would assume that she just didn't finish it. So now I've got almost all of my students have finished it. This student is still absent. So I've got a couple of choices here. I can pause it, and that means that no students now can access the test. So it's the equivalent of saying, okay, put your papers down. We're going to start on, we've run out of time. We're going to finish it tomorrow. Or I can close it, which is the equivalent of saying, time's up, turn your papers in, put your pencils down. You no longer have time to work on this test. So if it's a long assessment, sometimes for when we're doing the practice tests for the state practice tests, for example, and those can be an hour and a half long, but you only have a 45-minute period, you as a teacher can pause this and lock it down, excuse me, can pause it and lock it down, and then just reopen it for the students when they come back in the next day or the next period. I do need to, however, grade this, this manual one. So I'm going to click on question 7. And I'm going to look and I'm seeing, so the question here is write your own sentence. Now bold the subject, underline the predicate, and italicize the verb. Now I'm looking at my student and the student didn't do that. So I could just give a 0 grade. I could give some feedback like you wrote a sentence, but you didn't finish. But as I look through here, I see none of the students have done this. None of them have followed that score. So this leads me to my next section, which is, whoops, I made a mistake. As a teacher, it sometimes happens that we will put a test out there. It's been open and accessed. Students have actually submitted their work, but we found an error. So I'm going to jump over here and check out that error and see what happened here that all the students did not answer this correctly. So I'm going back to my assignments. I'm going to go up here to the assessment. I'll go up to actions, and I'm going to view the test details. This is taking me to the exact test that I worked or that I assigned. And I'll go down to that question and it says, write your own sentence. And I've got that part is correct, but I do see that the kind of question I used was an essay with plain text. And I know from using Edulastic that if it's plain text, the students are not allowed to add any kind of formatting like bolding or underlining or italicizing. So that explains why the students didn't do that. So my mistake. Here's how I'm going to correct that. I'm going to go back to the assignment screen. I'm going to go to actions, and I'm going to use edit and regrade. So you may have seen this before, and you may have even used it before, but we do get a lot of questions from teachers who are unsure of the selections to make and unsure of how much they can actually edit the assessment. So I'm going to walk you through that process. So I need to edit and regrade this. It's giving me this warning that says it's already been assigned to students. Students are already taking this. Do you sure you want to proceed on this? And yes, I do. Now, I have assigned this to my students so I can fix it. I am also happen to be the author of this assessment, so I can fix it. If I was using an assignment that an admin had assigned to me or to my class as a common assessment, then the admin would be the one that has to make these changes. Alternatively, the author can go in and make the changes, but it wouldn't be, those changes wouldn't flow to any other districts or any other classes that had picked up that wrong assessment from the library and assigned it incorrectly. So just know that there are some parameters to it, and that if you are finding that there is an error and it's a common assessment, you need to contact the administrator that assigned it. However, if it's your own class error or you've assigned it just to your own classes, then you can fix it just as I'm about to show you. So I'm going to go down to that last sentence. This one is obviously not right. It's the essay with plain text. So before I delete it, I am going to come up here to my items and see if I can find the one that I did that was with rich text. And oh yes, it happens to be at the top here. And I should have chosen that. So I'm going to add this. And I'm going to remove this one because you see it's the second sentence. So I can remove it here. I could also remove it from the review screen. And so now you'll see that I'm still in draft form, but now I have the essay with rich text, which means that my students would be able to now go in and edit with formatting and those extra features. So I've got that, I've removed one. So now I need to go up here and I'm going to regrade. Now, at the same time, I could change some points before I regraded it. I could change the point value. I could add or remove questions. And by doing this, it will shuffle all of the assessments that have already been submitted. It will regrade them and shuffle through them, regrade them. It will also make any changes to those students who have not yet started. the assignments or any classes that it's not yet been open to. So this one fell swoop is making a change across the board. So I am not going to remove this, and I'm going to reset this so I don't adjust the point value here. And then I will hit regrade. Now here is an area that sometimes can cause pause for some teachers. And that is, what do I choose for these? When you've added any of the items that we've added, how do you want to score it? Well, you could give 0 points, you could give full credit, or you could go in and manually grade each one of those items. I typically will use the give full points because I want it to be automated for me. I don't want to have to go in and regrade each individual class. Then I can look at, how do I want on the items that I edited, so the ones that I changed the point value with, or I might have gone in and actually edited the text on a question. Do I want to score those? Do I want to rescore automatically? Or do I want to turn that into a manually graded question where I would need to go in, like I did the other essay, and regrade it? So I want this to rescore any automation for me automatically. So I'm going to choose right now, give full points and rescore automatically for the least amount of work on my part. And then I need to choose which ones am I giving these to? So typically you would give it to all assignments that are out there. So this will cover anybody who, as I've said already, has taken it, is working on it, or has yet to take it. So choosing all assignments is the blanket option. Or I can exclude assignments where these settings have been overridden. And what that means is, if you have a group of students or a class of students where you have changed the setting, like perhaps they haven't received this question, or you've got different settings set up for them that you don't want to, you can exclude those overridden assignments, or you can choose to have them all. And then any item that I remove will automatically be discarded, and the score will reflect that it's been removed. So once I've done that, now all I have to do is hit publish and regrade. Excuse me. And I can go directly to the live class board and see the changes that have happened. So now it has so question number 7 has been removed because that's the one that I removed. So now I need to redirect it to all of my students. So when you've got a significant change like I did, where I pulled off a question and added another one, you'll need to go back in and redirect it and then give those students the opportunity to retake it. Had I selected one of the other options to skip over it, then the classes that haven't taken it would just not have to go back and do it. It would still be submitted. Excuse me. But the classes that haven't taken it yet or haven't opened it yet would see the new version. So I'm going to redirect it to these students. And here's an example of what the redirect looks like. So I can redirect it just to certain students or the entire class, or I can just collectively redirect it to all absent students. I'm going to do the entire class. I can choose which questions are going. So I can send all questions back to them, or I can just do the ones that were skipped and wrong. In this situation, because I've removed things and haven't really had a chance to double check it, for security measures, I think I'm going to send all back. And then I can show how much I want to reveal to them. Do they want to see just my feedback, which would be like rethink this one? Do they want to see the score they received plus the teacher feedback, or just their response and the teacher feedback, or all of it? So you can choose everything. I think probably the safest might be the teacher feedback, but depending on depending on how secure this test needs to be, you can choose, or the type of test you're giving, you can choose what option you would use. And now I'm going to hit redirect. All those students now have access to go back in, and so on their screens, they'll see that they can go in and retake it. So that's sort of the process for fix and regrade. And now, once you've gotten some of those details, those classroom and test management details underway, you're ready to start grading and reporting on the grades. So I'm going to do a little trick here, and I'm going to resubmit all of these so that we can see the score. And now I'll get back to the score that I had, minus that one question that I've played around with. And so here, everybody's finished. I've got all of my students have turned everything in, and I am now going to share the grades. So the way that you can do that is up here, up in this little 3 dots, and now I can release the score for all the students. If I'm looking at grading as well, I can jump over here to the Express Grader, and I can look, and so maybe I needed to modify one, like this absent student. It turned out that he was absent and never made it back into class because he was ill, but I sent home a printed version of the test, and so he did it on paper, and now I can enter his responses using the Express Grader. So I'm going to do that. So for him, I'll just click in his name and be looking at his actual work on my screen, and I can go through here and I can give him the credit. I'm just at random putting this on here. This one happened to have a rubric to it, so students can see what that rubric looks like. And you can grade it by rubric. So I can say he got 3 points here, 2 points here, 1 point here, and 1 point here, for a total of 7 out of 12. And then all that information is saved. And so now I've got his answers captured in here as well. So that's the Express Grader. You can choose just to do the points, or you can actually enter their answers as well. And the other thing that we'll point out when it comes to grading or sharing the grades is back up here, we've got this report card. This allows, this creates a printer-friendly version for each student of how they did on that one test. So it'd be the equivalent of like sending home a spelling test for the parents to put it up on the refrigerator. So you can choose as a teacher what you want to include. So I want the parents to see that the performance band that the student fell in. I want to see how they did on each question. I want to see what their actual answer was, what the correct answer was, and how they performed on the standards and mastery of the standards that were tested. So I'll generate this. It creates a nice little PDF style that you can send to the printer. These tools work really well for parent-teacher conferences. They work well for just storing scores in a CUME file, for example, or keeping a paper copy, or sending home progress to the students. So you'll see here's the first student. Her name is Lark Blue. Here's her score. The second student. And everybody has an example of the question they got, what their answer was, what the correct answer was, where they fell in terms of the proficiency levels, and how they scored on each standard that was tested. Again, this assessment's fairly skewed because the last question I removed and then didn't have any answers for anybody, but you can imagine if it was automatically scored, how it would just repopulate for them, and then you've got this nice version to send home and show the parents exactly how they did on their assessment. It also doesn't include, you can exclude answers. So you can send something home where the teacher can see what the student did in terms of proficiency, but not giving away the answers as well. I'm just gonna X out of that. That's the Express Grader, and that is the report card. Now, as a teacher, I wanna dive in and see how my students are doing on the standards that were tested. You'll notice that this is a new feature that we have if you've used Edulastic in the past. To have all of this right here, it makes it very quick and easy to just get a quick summary of how they're done. And so overall, the class has performed well. I'm in the green for both. They're in the 90th and 91st percentile, almost 92nd, and these two standards that were covered. So in theory, I could move on and start teaching other standards. I can rest easy that they knew what was going on here. Before I move from this section, I'm going to jump over here to the settings. This allows me to dive into some of the settings that you would have for each assessment and each class. And you would also see this same screen when you're creating an assessment. But since we're here, it's kind of easy. You've seen the tests that we're talking about, so you can get an idea of what kind of settings I'd want to put in here. So I'm going to start by just going through each one of these levels here, knowing though that the reason that this settings is on this screen right here is that if you had to update the settings for some reason and make some changes, you could do that here and then resubmit or update it, and students that haven't taken the test would see a different experience. So the open date and close date, this is the time frame for the open and close window. The open and close policy, again, all of these are grayed out because this test has already been submitted. But the open and close policies here are if you want to manually open it in class, which is how I've set this up. I did that because this is a high stakes test for my class, and I don't want students to have access to it the minute that it's open. I wanted to be able to mark students as absent and remove some students from the test until I knew that they were ready, they were not going to cheat, or they were in front of me, and it was I'm preserving the integrity of the assessment. The close manually or close automatically, that's really up to you. Close manually just makes that you have to remember to close it. Automatically is as soon as the date hits, it will close automatically. Here's where you can choose to release the scores, not to release anything, to release the scores, to release scores and their answers, or to release scores, their answers, and the correct answers. So again, on a high stakes benchmark, I'm not going to release the scores until I'm ready to release them. And again, I can do that up here when I'm ready. I can release all the scores to the students. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at is class level settings. So you'll see that down here. When I open this up, this is what settings do I want this particular group of students to experience. So if I had a class that was comprised of like IEP or remedial students, and they needed to have a softer experience than my other classes, I could manipulate the settings here to give them a couple more attempts. So for each they could go through the assessment more than one time, and it would be basically an automatic redirect. I could also choose that maybe this group I want to show the calculator, and then if they want to answer on paper, I can make that available so we can print it out to them. And then I also have this option of how many times they can attempt each question. So maybe for this group, I'm going to give them two tries for each question. Whereas the other groups, they have one shot and they have to submit it. So that's how I can modify the settings to fit the needs of different classes. Or if I've set up a group of students, like for example, a group of honors students, I could have some settings that would be unique to that group, including like the amount of time that they had and other things that would give them a more customized experience. So that's where you could set the class level settings. The same assessment, you've got the same, you'll still be able to grade it and look at you'll still be able to look at the reports and the data in the same way. But in this scenario, you're just modifying the behavior a little bit. Now let's jump down to the test level settings. So this is that's going to everybody. So this is across the whole test, all of your classes. This is a class assessment, which means I assigned it to my students. But I have another option. I can make it a practice assessment. By making it a practice assessment, it's moving this into like a formative check or a quick check. Could be an exit ticket or at the beginning of a unit just to see how much knowledge they're bringing into the assessment. If you make it a practice assessment, it matters because when you're looking at the results in the reports, you can filter out the practice assessments and just focus on the class or the common assessments. Or you can also run the same report and look at all of the assessments across the year, including the practice assessments, and get a real gauge for how your students have fared across the year. So that's the difference between a class and a practice. Practice is generally a lot looser. It's not scored, or it has multiple attempts. For example, up here, they can redirect it and they can have several tries. This is just a much more formative approach. The player skin, this is a new thing for premium accounts. You can select one of we call it a skin. It's the way that the students will see the test, and it can mimic the same screens and the same look that they'll experience in the standardized test at the end of the year. So TestNav is the big one with like Park and a lot of the other East Coast tests that are given. SBAC tends to be on the West Coast. Colorado has their own version, and then the CASP version is also a California version that's slightly different. So you can mimic or give them the experience of the tests that they'll be taking in the spring. We'll keep it on the Edulastic test, which is sort of agnostic. Some of these other ones, I can choose to shuffle the questions, shuffle the answers. If my district has set up Safe Exam Browser or kiosk mode, that is a feature that must be set up at the district level and run through like networked computers, for example. If that's set up already, you can turn that on for these tests. You can, again, shuffle the questions and the answers to create different versions. You can require a password. So this would mean that the students would not be able to access the assessment until they're given a password by you. It can be one password that you create, or it can be a dynamic password that changes as often as you make the settings. So when we go to the build section of this, if you haven't seen that, I can walk through the details of what that looks like. But in other words, you can have an automatic password that will be regenerated, something that isn't easily identifiable, and you can have a new password that's regenerated every 5 minutes. So just make sure that the students who are working from home or those sly students who are trying to get in on the side won't be able to access it without the correct password and without you knowing. The evaluation method is partial credit, or where you can give, if you have a multi-part question or you have a multi-select question where you've got more than one answer, you can choose to give partial credit for any of the ones that they've gotten right and not give credit for the parts of the answer that they got wrong. Or you've got the option of just scoring them, just giving them credit for the ones they got and not penalizing them for the ones that got wrong. Or the third option is all or nothing. So they have to get all parts of the question right in order to get credit on that. And again, this is sort of dependent on the nature of your standardized tests or your district's big tests. You can mimic this, have it model the situations that the students would be experiencing on the high stakes test. It could also be just what you're giving for a formative versus a benchmark assessment or a high stakes assessment. And finally, you can set a timer for this. So the students will be notified that they have 45 minutes to complete this test. As the teacher, you'll be able to say, will the students get 45 minutes in one chunk? And once they start, they have to complete that 45 minutes. Or you can allow them to spread the 45 minutes out over multiple sessions. And that's a choice that you can make. It's an option when this opens up. Finally, teachers can change the performance bands. You can only change these for the assignments that you have created. For the common assessments that are assigned by an admin, that's set by the admin, and teachers can't modify that. And then the same thing with the grading scale. So you can change the mastery, what's considered mastered, proficient, basic, below basic. You can also change the names of these for your own classes. The admin will set it for the district. And then finally, this is a really new one for us this year. We've got these accessibility features down at the bottom. So you can enable a magnifier, and the student will see a little magnifying glass on their version, and they can scroll in and see it. You can enable Scratchpad. So it used to be that when we assigned it, you had to enable or disable Scratchpad, but now by default, it's always enabled, so you can turn it off. And if you don't change it, the students will see it no matter what. So it's always there. Same thing with the rubrics. They will see it when it's assigned if you've set a rubric up on the question. And then again, you've got the other option here of changing the skin. So once you've updated this, you can just make the changes there. And that's the settings. So now I can go back over to my assignment. I can see some of these are in grading. These students haven't started it yet, but I did change the class around, or I changed the test around for them. So any students that are starting this will now see the new version of the test. And we'll move on to the build section. So I'm going to spend about maybe 5 minutes on the build section, and then we can jump into questions and answers. So let me jump back over here and just sort of show you the flow for building. This is something that you've all experienced, I'm sure. So this, again, you can look back at these slides and see all of the features I've just showed you. And then here's the tips and tricks for building a test. So this really relates to curriculum teams who are sharing and co-building assessments, like for the school year for a grade or a subject level. for the district or for the school or just for their department. It works for, these tips and tricks will work for any admins who are working on assigning common assessments or building common assessments, and then any class assignments that a teacher has assigned. And so when you create from scratch, the first thing I think everybody needs to know about is we've got these new super user power tools. So I need to show you where to toggle those on if you haven't already. Anybody who's building questions and has this turned on will see some advanced features that help you change and affect the layout and some of the options for the answers too. For some of the math questions, it'll restrict certain answers to just numeric, or it gives you a whole slew of behaviors you can change as a super user. So you'll toggle that on, you'll go into the test library and either create from scratch or find one. If you're creating it from scratch, you're going to add the new items. You're going to add rubrics if you're using those. You'll add a scratch pad if you're using that. Then you can save it and review it. And at this point is when you'd share it with your colleagues. And then as you're ready to publish it or assign it, you'll assign the metadata, which is the standards, the depth of knowledge. I'll also show you where you can put tags. So for PLC groups or common assessments, it might be important to have some nomenclature there to help identify what benchmark is to be given when, and that's where the tags can become helpful. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is the test settings again, where you can lock it down so that other users can't adjust those settings. That again would be used when it's like a PLC group or a district admin that is assigning it across the district and doesn't want the teachers to be able to manipulate those settings. Like for example, one group being able to use a calculator on a test and another group not being able to use it. So you want to keep it as equitable as possible. So let's jump back over here. I'm going to go into the test library as I talked about on the flow, and I'm going to create a new test. I'm going to create it from scratch. I'll enter the name. We'll just call this practice for advanced. I'll need, when you're creating something, you can't get past this page until you put some of these details down. It just makes sure that it stays. Oh, but you know what I forgot to do? I forgot to come over here and show you in your profile how you're going to add the power test. So let's do that before the power tools. Let's do that. You're going into your profile, clicking on my profile, scrolling down to the very bottom and toggling on this tool called Power User. If you don't ever create assessments or create questions, you may want to keep this off because it is just an extra set of features that can be overwhelming to some people and bothersome to others. But if you're using it and you're creating it, then you'll be interested in having those. So I've got that toggled on. Now I'm going to jump back over here and repeat that process. I'm going to create a new test. I'm going to create it from scratch. I'll enter the name, a description if I wanted, the grade, the subject. And here at a test level, I can enter names or I can enter tags. So I could say something like fall 2020. ELA number CFA1. That way my teachers know that they can search on that tag and it will pull up all the tests that they're supposed to take that fall under that category. So keep being consistent about that if you're building as commons is a good best practice to follow. And now I'm ready to add items. So I can create my own items. I'm going to just pop into one real quick so you can get an idea of what those super user tools do. Let's jump over here to, let's do a math question. And let's try matrices. And then under the advanced options. So you see, without these advanced options, an average user or a non-super user, for lack of better words, would just put the expected answer, put the point value, and it's simple. It's much simpler procedure. If you want to add a whole bunch of extra things, though, this is where you would want to do the advanced options, and you can enable certain things here. You can create a new rubric. or you can use an existing one. Let's see. And so you can, if you've already created one and saved one, you can search on one. I know I've created one for persuasive writing, which doesn't match the math one, but it works. So I'm going to view that. It looks good for me, and I'm going to use it. So now that rubric is attached to my lesson or to my question. You can enable scoring instructions. You can give students some information. This is really interesting for younger students. You can change the template size, large, extra large. You can change, oops, I changed it. Oh, I don't know what I just did. Let's see here. So in large, extra large, huge. So you can see how each question can really be tailored for a subset or a group of students. And each year you can make the changes. Again, you've got default keypads here for math. And you've got distractor or rationale, which is the reason why an answer should be right or wrong. You've got an explanation that the students would see, and you can choose to add hints or not. So once you've typed in a question, I'm just going to put some gobbledygook here for the sake of time. Preview it the way a student would see it. You can show the answer, which I didn't set. You can get the experience of how the student's going to answer it in preview mode. And then the metadata. This is where you're going to attach a standard. Let's just grab something here. Grab the first one that comes up. And here you can select depth of knowledge, difficulty level, Bloom's taxonomy level, and then you can also tag at a question level. So here's another example where you might put, this relates to chapter 2, unit 1, or unit 2, and that's the tag that will be there. So now my teachers, if they're searching in our district or school library for anything that's related to chapter 2, unit 2, and they've tagged it, or they filtered for math, then these questions would come up for them to be able to use. And I'll save that question. Oh, I didn't set the answers on this. Just put something in here. It's got an alternate answer showing up here. Let's just do this. Let's see if that works. So I am going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to grab an item here. And now I'm back to the beginning. As you can see, I'm just doing anything here. I'll pick a couple of questions, clear these, add a few questions, drop the review. And now I'm back. I can review the questions that I've done so far. And now I'm back here at settings, where I can lock down the settings for the test. Before I do that, if I'm working with other people, I can share this to other individuals in my group. So I can start by entering their names here, and I'll get the choice. And this, just like a Google Doc, you could choose to give them just view only, or actually edit, or view and duplicate. So I'm going to let this colleague do that, and then I'll share it. Okay, so this gets us back to, this test is being shared. My colleagues can all work on this together. And then when we're finished, we can set these settings as we discussed already. So we've gone through what each one of these are. These are just some of the options here. But by setting these settings, you can lock them down, so the other students or other teachers can't manipulate these when you've assigned it. So I'm gonna stop here now. We've got 10 minutes left to answer some questions. So do we have any that I can jump in and start answering?
Definitely, yeah. Thanks, Jenny. That was really helpful. Lots of nice things coming in the chat for you. But we do have we do have some questions for you. I think it'd be best for you to continue sharing your screen.
Okay. Am I still showing it? Yeah.
Yep, all good. The first question is from Jennifer, and she's asking, can you make some questions be graded with partial credit and others be set for manual grading?
You can. so at the test, at the question level, you can do that. Get in here and let's just one. That tends to be at a, okay, so it has to be the right ones that I've selected. So it has to be like a multiple select question, and then you can set those parameters there. I can take a screenshot and show you later if we have a lot of questions, or while the next one's coming up, I can find one of those multiple select or multi-part.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jenny. We do have quite a few questions. So next question is from Catherine. If you put the assignment in twice by accident, how do you delete the duplicated assignment? Or how would you unassign a duplicated assignment?
Okay, so that's easy. That you're just going to come up here and you're going to go by class. You'll click on the live class board. So this is not us unassigning it across the board to everybody at once. This is class by class, and that's secure. That's conscious security choice. And then you're going to unassign to all students. So you go onto the live class board up to the 3 dots, the more dots, and then select unassign to all students. That'll remove it.
Great, thank you. Catherine, hopefully that answered your question. Jenny, I'm wondering if next you could talk a little bit more in depth about redirect and about the different options you have when redirecting an assignment. Specifically, like, can you show just skipped answers or just incorrect answers in a premium account?
Yeah, so let's go into one that's in progress. Oh, I redirected all of these. Let's jump. In grading. I'm going to pick this student and I'm going to redirect. So here's where you get the choices. You can choose who gets it. It can be the entire class or just one student. This is where you're going to choose. Do I want all the questions? I want the students to see all the questions, or just the ones that they have skipped and the ones they got wrong. So this is usually the popular choice. And then here you can do, again, just the teacher's feedback. So when you're grading on the live class board, you can add comments to each of the students so that they'll see just the feedback, or you can choose for them to see their score and your feedback, or just their score and your feedback, or just their response and your feedback, so they don't see a score, or everything. They can see what they scored on that first attempt, what their response was, and what your feedback was.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny.
And if you have looked for redirect in the past and you haven't seen these, it's because we've been tweaking and honing it down a little bit. We've really made it a lot stronger. So even in the last couple of days, we made some changes to it. So if this looks new to you, that's likely why.
Awesome. Thank you. Debbie is wanting a little bit more information on student reports. Specifically, what would you recommend if you were wanting to print a report that had actual questions on it as well?
Okay, so I think you'd have to do it in 2 separate ways. Off the top of my head, this is what I'm thinking of. One, the report card would only show their answers and how they scored, but you could, as the teacher, make a printed version and send it home. You could print the test, and so you can print the complete test. You can print just the manually graded items, or a subset that you choose. So this print test function actually is made for the teacher who has assigned an essay assessment and doesn't want to try to read it on the assignment, on the Edulastic screen, and actually would like to mark up and make comments on the student's writing. So we developed it for that, but I think that this would actually work in that situation where you could print out the complete test for the teachers or the students to see. It would be one version of it. Let me see. I'm going to play around with something real quick here. I think. Yeah, no, okay, so this would be, that option would be printing it out with all the students' answers as well. So you could send that home if you wanted, and it would be probably graded or ungraded depending on what status you're in. I haven't played around with it like that, so I'd have to play around a little bit.
Cool, thanks, Jenny. And then Lori's wondering if we enabled text-to-speech, how can we be sure that it's on for students? Is there a way to double check that, or what would you recommend?
Well, the students will know it's on because they'll see the little logo, the little symbol up in the top left corner of their screen. So I think we've got this proxy tool, but you can't get into a student's test itself. You can't open a student's test using the proxy tool, so you aren't able to see it. So what I would say is you'd have to do sort of two things. You'd have to, one, make sure it's come to the managed class and make sure it's turned on for that student. Like, for example, it's turned on for this student, but not this one. If I were to go into this student's assessment, I'm just gonna, you're not able to open it for them. So you would have to, right, so you wouldn't be able to see if it's turned on, but then you could look to see it was turned on your side, and then you could have the student open it and confirm that.
Okay.
That's an interesting feature that we'll take note of, though.
Totally, I agree. Hopefully that helped answer your question, Lori. But yeah, you can trust that if it's on, it will be working for students. And then Jenny, last question before I take back over. Do you mind showing where you would go to create a brand new rubric?
Oh, sure. So the rubric option shows up when you're doing just specific questions. So I'm going to show you one that I know for sure will show up, and that's with a passage-based question or a writing question. And we'll do essay with rich text. And so this is when I'm building it. I'm in the edit mode of this question. I'm going to select grading rubric, and I'm going to create a new rubric. And so here I'm just going to enter the names, enter the description. My criteria could be like organization, and then I can add ratings. So typically they would be 3-point ratings, sometimes a 4. So then you can change these rating tabs to match your the rubric you're using. So if this one is, the criteria is like organization or structure, the next one might be evidence, word choice, etc. And so then you can continue to clone or to add. Now, if you've got one down, and so for example, it's often the case that the organization category will have a rating 1, 2, 3, 4, and rating 1 is excellent, rating 2 is well done, rating 3 is average, and rating 4 is needs improvement. So all you have to do is clone that, and you don't have to retype that every time. So now I've got a second evidence here, and I can just, I've cloned it, and I can just just tweak it, or tweak just the criteria name if I needed to. Once you're done, you save it and use it. And then I highly encourage you to, I've got to play around with it, but I've got to finish it. It won't let me do it when it's 0. I highly encourage you to share it with the group so that other people can use your existing rubric. And you just type on the topic like math. I don't think we have any in here. Oh, we do. Math explanation. So I can now use my colleague's math explanations rubric.
Cool. Thanks, Jenny. Do you mind if I take back over screen sharing?
Not at all.
Awesome. So I wanted to note that we do have a follow-up survey that everybody will be redirected to once you log off of this webinar. We really value your feedback and would really appreciate it if you took that survey. And then lastly, I wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. I think that this has been a really informative hour. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, Jenny, for that great presentation. And for everybody who has joined us today, I encourage you to follow us on social media. We're really active there, and that's where we're posting our newest updates and little tips and feature announcements and other fun stuff like that. So again, thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you have a lovely evening.